I want to tell you a story. It starts with a single email. An email so strange, it captured the imagination of the entire internet. In 2020, a Reddit user was digging through a searchable database of leaked Hillary Clinton emails, and they found something that didn't look real. It reads, requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the location of the buried Nephilim. As you would expect, conspiracy forums lit up. Why was Hillary Clinton trying to track down the tomb of Gilgamesh? And why was she trying to resurrect him? But the truth was much simpler. The Reddit user had done the search incorrectly, and they had pulled in results that weren't Hillary Clinton's emails. She was never involved, and it wasn't her email. It was just an ordinary citizen requesting strange information through a FOIA request. When people realized that Clinton wasn't involved, the story died. But what's forgotten is this FOIA request does have a kernel of truth in it. 13 years earlier, in 2003, a team of German archaeologists allegedly discovered the burial site of Gilgamesh. The researchers used magnetic surveys to map the ancient city of Uruk. Under the dry riverbed of the Euphrates, the researchers detected a massive rectangular tomb that matched the description of his tomb in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It was called one of the most important discoveries in Mesopotamian archaeology. But just days after the announcement, the United States launched the invasion of Iraq.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Within weeks, American forces had reached Uruk, and the excavation was stopped. The news of the discovery went totally silent, and the researchers left the country. No further reports were published, and it was as if the discovery had never happened. Of course, conspiracy-minded researchers didn't see this timing as accidental. With that said, there is no evidence that these events are connected, and in my opinion, they aren't. But it's exactly the kind of coincidence that makes for a great conspiracy. And this got me thinking. Because while this story isn't a conspiracy, history is packed with examples that are. We have documented cases of governments pouring enormous resources into finding relics that they believe have supernatural powers. Whether these objects actually existed or they hold any power is up for debate, but that didn't stop nations from risking everything to find them. Today, we're going to look at these real secret projects, missions planned behind closed doors and launched into deserts and ice, all to hunt for magic relics they still pretend don't exist. To begin, I want to stay in the United States but travel back to the 1970s. This was when the government began experimenting with remote viewing. If you are unfamiliar with remote viewing, the idea is to train psychic spies to see across space and time by focusing their mind on a specific target. The CIA and the DIA believed that remote viewing could become the ultimate intelligence weapon, and they poured millions of dollars into testing it. The program went through several names. It was called Project Grillflame and Gondola Wish and Sunstreak, but the name that everybody remembers is Project Stargate. At its peak, Stargate employed dozens of trained psychics. They were told to sketch enemy missile sites, hidden bunkers, and locate hostages overseas. In some cases, their descriptions were so accurate that military commanders were forced to take these reports seriously. But almost nobody talks about what else these psychics were asked to find. The CIA didn't want them to only spy on the Soviets. They wanted them to find the Ark of the Covenant. And if you don't know much about the Ark of the Covenant, I actually have a full video on it that you should check out. The short version of it is this. The Ark of the Covenant is believed to be the place where God himself resides. It is the heart of Jewish worship and the centerpiece of their temple. It was lost after the destruction of the first temple and was never seen again. As it pertains to Stargate, declassified documents showed that remote viewers were given coordinates and told to search for the Ark. What's even stranger is they didn't stop with the Ark. They were also tasked with remote viewing the planet Jupiter, the dark side of the moon, and even a civilization on Mars. In several of these planetary sessions, they reported seeing structures, towers, machinery, and even habitations. By the end of the Cold War, Project Stargate had produced thousands of pages of diagrams and reports. All of this sounds impossible, but it's true. The idea of governments spending money to find odd relics didn't start in the Cold War, though. It goes back much further. Long before America experimented with psychic spies, Europe's dictators were already obsessed with magic relics that they believed could change history. Let's go back to the 1930s, when Benito Mussolini was imagining himself as a new Caesar. He wanted to build an empire stretching across Africa all the way to the Mediterranean. But conquering these territories wasn't enough. He needed symbols. He needed something that would prove that his rule was destined by God. In 1935, Mussolini ordered Italy to invade Ethiopia. Publicly, he called it a civilizing mission. But behind the rhetoric, there was a different motive. He wanted to find the Ark of the Covenant and use it to legitimize his power. Mussolini believed the Ark was hidden in Ethiopia because for centuries, Ethiopian priests had claimed that they were its guardian. According to their tradition, the real Ark had been kept in a small church in Axum, known as the Chapel of the Tablet. And according to Ethiopian priests, the Ark was brought to Axum by the son of King Solomon and Queen Sheba. They say that before the first temple was destroyed, an angel appeared to Solomon's son and commanded him to take the Ark out of Jerusalem and carry it into Ethiopia. To Mussolini, the idea of seizing the Ark was irresistible. If he could bring the Ark back to Rome, it would prove that Italy was destined to reclaim its place at the heart of a new Christian civilization. The Italians invaded and looted thousands of manuscripts and treasures, but official reports say nothing about the Ark. And Ethiopian priests insist that the Ark never left their church. But Mussolini wasn't the only one who saw history as a battleground for legitimacy. In Germany, another regime was taking the same idea even further. The Nazis were using archaeology to prove their own myths and rewrite history completely. In 1935, Heinrich Himmler created the Ahnenerbe. It was also known as the Ancestral Heritage Organization. On paper, it was an academic society dedicated to German history and folklore. But behind the polite language, it was an ideological weapon. Himmler believed that he could prove that the Aryan race was a superior lineage tied to the forgotten first civilization. He thought that if he could prove his claims, Nazis would be justified in conquering ancestral lands. Himmler's team searched the world for relics that blurred the line between myth and reality. They believed that whoever held these objects could claim their power and define their destiny. The list of relics that they were looking for reads like a medieval legend. They searched for Atlantis because they were convinced that it was the homeland of their Aryan ancestors before the Great Flood. They looked for Thor's hammer because it was believed to be an ancient superweapon shrouded under myth. They sent expeditions to Spain and France to track down the Spear of Destiny, which is said to be the spear that pierced Christ's side on the cross. The legend goes that whoever holds the spear can never be defeated in battle. Charlemagne, crowned Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire by Pope Leo III, was said to have carried the spear through 48 consecutive victories, until the day that he dropped the spear and died. But Himmler's greatest obsession was the Holy Grail. The Grail is said to be the cup that was used by Jesus during the Last Supper. To Himmler, it wasn't just a Christian relic. He believed that it was a bridge back to the lost wisdom of the Aryans. But reclaiming the history of Europe wasn't enough for Himmler. He was convinced that the most powerful secrets lay further east, hidden in the shadows of the Himalayas. And in 1938, the Nazis sent an expedition to Tibet. Officially, it was a scientific mission to collect biological specimens and study Buddhist culture. But behind the scenes, they were searching for proof that Tibet was the birthplace of the Aryan race. The team measured skulls and cataloged plants and animals and packed up thousands of artifacts. But they were also given special orders. They were told to gather religious texts and question local monks about a hidden kingdom called Shambhala. In Buddhism, Shambhala is believed to be a secret land of perfect wisdom, a place that holds a record of humanity's forgotten past, which is waiting to be revealed when the world is ready. But while Himmler was still planning his mission to Tibet, another seeker had already arrived in Central Asia. A man by the name of Nicholas Roerich was already in Tibet on a similar mission. Roerich was a Russian Orthodox painter and mystic whose journeys blurred the line between legend and reality. He wasn't only a painter, he was an explorer and a theosophist. Theosophy is a movement that combines Eastern spiritual teachings with Western occult ideas. They also teach that civilizations rise and fall in cosmic cycles, and places like Atlantis or Lemuria or Hyperborea were real lost worlds. And according to their beliefs, hidden masters who remember these worlds still exist. And these spiritual guides can lead humanity to a place of enlightenment. But to find these guides, you must look in secret realms like Shambhala or Agartha, which is the vast mystical kingdom hidden inside of the hollow earth. Before leaving for Tibet, while still in Mongolia, Roerich met a Buddhist Lama who entrusted him with a fragment of the Chintamani stone. The Lama told Roerich that he was meant to carry the stone back to Shambhala, and according to legend, the Chintamani stone is a piece of a fallen star that can guide entire nations towards enlightenment. It was said to bring wisdom and peace and prosperity to whoever owned it. But Roerich believed it wasn't just part of a Buddhist tradition. He thought that it was connected to Western traditions too. It was part of a larger tradition. In his view, the stone was linked to the Holy Grail and to the old European story of the Stone of Heaven. He saw all of this as fragments of the same story, the same hidden tradition. It's a legacy of sacred knowledge passed down from a lost, forgotten civilization. Strangely, at the same time, Roerich was also working for the US Department of Agriculture. Officially, he was looking for drought-resistant grasses in Tibet, but as you can imagine, some suspect that he was gathering intelligence for the Americans. His writings spread quickly through occult circles in both the US and Europe, and by the early 1930s, German occult groups had almost certainly read his work. Many believe that it actually helped inspire their decision to send an expedition to Tibet. Strangely, on this same journey, while camping in Mongolia, Roerich and his team claimed to see a metallic oval object flying through the sky at impossible speeds. This sighting is important because in these occult circles, it was widely believed that these forgotten civilizations had highly sophisticated flying machines. To the Nazis, this was proof that hidden weapons were still waiting to be found. I should mention that this next story is a blend of both fact and speculation that is hard to untangle. But in 1938, the Nazis launched an expedition to Antarctica. The official story was that they were mapping the ice for a new whaling station to fill their fat gap. Fat was needed for military production and everyday things like margarine, and supplies were running low because of the war. But on this expedition, the Germans didn't send a few small ships to check out Antarctica. They arrived with an icebreaker military boat, 2 flying ships, generals, infantrymen, and 82 scientists. From the start, the trip looked more like a military operation than a scouting mission. Almost immediately, the rumors began. People claimed that they weren't there to set up a whaling station at all. They were looking for an entrance into the hollow earth. The Nazis believed that the hollow earth was still accessible, and inside of the earth they would find the hidden kingdom of Agartha, which housed an ancient race of people and advanced technologies like UFOs. After the war, the rumors only grew. Then, in 1946, the United States launched Operation High Jump under Admiral Richard Byrd.
Our very distinguished guest for this evening is Admiral Richard E. Byrd.
Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily.
It was the largest Antarctic expedition ever attempted. The U.S. sent more than 4,000 troops, a fleet of ships, and dozens of aircraft to Antarctica. Officially, it was a cold weather training exercise, but journalists were suspicious from the beginning. There are all kinds of stories about what Richard Byrd saw in Antarctica. Most of these stories are fake or heavily exaggerated, but Byrd himself inadvertently fueled these speculations. In an interview with a Chilean newspaper, he warned that America could be attacked by enemy aircrafts from both poles. The article originally appeared in the newspaper El Mercurio on March 5, 1947, and it says this: Admiral Richard E. Byrd warned today that the United States should adopt measures of protection against the possibility of an invasion of the country by hostile planes coming from the polar regions. The Admiral explained that he was not trying to scare anyone, but the cruel reality is that in the case of a new war, the United States could be attacked by planes flying over one or both poles. This statement was made as part of a recapitulation of his own polar experience. Some believe that Byrd was hinting that the Nazis had found UFOs, and while I understand people thinking this, the more obvious reading is that he was warning Americans about improved military technology, not Atlantean flying machines. I should mention that there's zero evidence that underground bases or ancient technologies were ever discovered, but even as a rumor, this story refuses to die. And that's because the Nazis had spent enormous resources already looking for magical relics. Whether you believe any of these stories is up to you, but if you look closely, you'll notice something that's harder to explain. Again and again, the most powerful people in history acted as if these myths were real. They built empires around them. They launched expeditions to the corners of the earth to find them. They spilled blood and spent fortunes looking for things that might not have been real at all. Even if these relics were only stories, the desperation to find them was very real. If you are new here, my name is Taylor McMahon, and if you want more stories about the lost and forgotten parts of our world, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Right now, my stats show that 97% of my viewers aren't subscribed, so even a small increase helps me out tremendously. If you want to see the sources and fact checks for this episode, you can check out my newsletter, which is linked in the show notes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.